Hi, folks. Larry here.
Hi, everybody.
Jimmy's back. Jimmy has a fan club now. I have, in fact, I gave him, I printed them out and gave it to him. I have probably 10 or 15 people that request Jimmy. They send him hearts. They send him all kinds of messages and everything through me. And now, Jimmy, Jimmy is also doing other people's podcasts now, and he's become a heavyweight. He's getting there. Well, I got to try to talk.
You created a monster.
I got to try to talk you into doing your own. In fact, let me get. I want to get something for you guys because it was a question, and here's the question. Jimmy's fan club wants to know what other podcasts Jimmy's on. So I'm going to tell you the one he did recently, and it's the name of the podcast is on YouTube. It's called The Reality Report with Craig, and Tony. Now, Tony, I believe, is...
it's Craig Gatto, Gatto.
I'm telling them what they have to look for on the thing. That's what it says on YouTube.
Okay.
The Reality Report with Craig and Tony. They used to say Craig with his last name. Now they got this guy Tony.
Oh, it's changed. Oh, I didn't know
they
that.
changed it.
Okay.
So this is the last one you did with this guy. He's in that area. So
okay, he's into the mix. Okay.
Yeah, he's into the mix. He's your kind of guy, and he was asking you really good questions, and you answered them all.
Right. Well, I'm not lost for any questions.
No, you're very, very, very good. So anyway, go to YouTube and go to the Reality Report with Craig and Tony, and he did. In fact, do you know that they're advertising it now? They're advertising it ahead. You're on tomorrow night with this, like part 1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, as long as I can help a friend, if they feel that's entertaining enough, I'm willing to lend a helping hand.
Well, I don't know this guy Tony, but Craig's a real good guy.
They're both nice guys.
He's a nice guy. Guys. But that was a good. That was good. Well, Craig does these 2-hour jobs, but you only stayed for an hour. But that was good. Because that guy Tony asked you a lot of good questions, and it was good. So that's where he is, his fans, I hope I didn't create a monster
like
here.
Larry and I, when we banter more and get into it, and it's always like a 2-rounder.
I'll tell you when you won't see Jimmy no more. You won't see Jimmy when I call Jimmy, and Jimmy says, contact my manager. That'll be the end of me and Jimmy.
No, that won't happen. But just always remember, whenever you like what you see, always subscribe, hit like, ring the bell. This way you always get a chance to know what's upcoming.
I got to ask you a question.
With Larry and I. Yes,
I got to ask you a question. I never look at this stuff. Tom has convinced me. He's trying to show me how to look for stuff and everything else. And I'm always pressing the wrong button, screwing everything up, and then he gets mad at me. But he did show me how to see how many subscribers. Now, we have 1,702, I think, or 20 subscribers. They've been the same amount of subscribers for the last 2 months, 1,720. So either you're falling down on the job, or you better get out there and you better do something to boost this subscription stuff up.
I'll get on my horse like Paul Revere. I'll drum it up.
Anyway, what we're going to talk about today is I'm going to go on a bit of a rant. And the reason I'm going to go on a bit of a rant is because I had breakfast the other day with a good friend of mine, and I keep asking him, tell me things that you heard about me from years ago. And he was in the racehorse business his whole life. He was in every business. He covered a lot of ground in his life, and he knows stories of me from both sides of the fence. And this is, and I'm going to get to them as time goes, but this is one of them, and I found it very interesting because from this, I'm going to go into one or two other things, but it was this story that he told me. It's not about me, but it's about a situation, a phone call that was made, and then I'm going to go into it, and you'll see what I mean. So let me just start reading. Okay, this was about a fixed trifecta race at Yonkers Raceway in 1987. In November 14th in 1987, the fourth race at Yonkers was a trifecta race with an 8-horse field. The reason I'm reading is because I could never remember everything. I'll leave something out, so I just typed it up and I'm reading it. The race, it was an 8-horse field trifecta race. The race was won by Falcon's Man, an 18-1 shot. The favorites in the race finished up the racetrack. I think one finished fifth, the other one finished behind him, I think. So the favorites were out of the trifecta. The winning trifecta numbers were 714. The trifecta with the favorites out of it should have paid in the thousands. It paid $192.
Wow.
Well, the grandstand started rocking. The people went nuts. And by the next day, there was a major investigation that was launched, headed by New York State Police Department and Detective Herman Kluge, who I knew of him. Tough guy. Tough guy. Especially if you're on the other side, he's a tough guy. And his team. And we referred to them as Kluge's stooges. That's what we call them.
Okay.
So anyway, all the drivers in that race were questioned and suspended immediately. The New York Post columnist Bill Finley wrote several articles keeping the public up to date on what was happening with the investigation and in what direction the investigation was going. At one point, Mr. Finley named an individual of interest in that case. That individual happened to be my friend. Anyway, he who told me the story. He was known as a gambler, but was never charged. The Westchester County District Attorney, Carl Vigari, I think that's how you say it, was pressured by track president Tim Rooney and the New York State Racing Commission to indict somebody, anybody. They started this thing. So far, nobody was indicted, and they were pressured by Tim Rooney, the president of the racetrack, and the State Racing Commission. There was well over $100,000 cashed on that race. More than $80,000 of it was cashed at one window at OTB, the OTB on 2nd Avenue in Manhattan.
Wow.
Those winning tickets were sent to the FBI for, I don't know, they thought that maybe they get some fingerprints off the tickets.
Right.
Because they didn't have no film, they had nothing. But because back then, the tickets went through all these machines and everything else.
The guys invested, that was Kluge's.
Yeah, well, they sent him to the FBI, the winning tickets.
Right.
You hand in the winning, they give you the money. All the winning tickets were handed into the FBI, but the fingerprints come back cloudy. They could all messed up because
Sure,
of all
probably
the
a lot of
machines.
fingerprints, sure.
No, not only that, but they went through the machine, and the machine, whatever. There was no fingerprints. They were fingerprints. They couldn't connect them. Yeah, I think you need something like 7 or 8 points on a fingerprint to make a match.
Identifiable point, right?
Yeah, and they didn't have that. Oh, you know about that stuff.
Oh yeah.
The findings were the findings for the findings for the tickets were inconclusive, and nobody was positively identified. At that point, the Westchester DA decided that no one involved would be facing any charges. Not the drivers, not the guy who cashed the tickets at OTB, and there was another place that cashed another $20,000 or $30,000 worth of tickets. Nobody was going to get pinched. Now, I don't remember where I heard it, but I do remember hearing it that, and this is true, but I didn't hear it firsthand, but I know it's true from somebody that heard it. Now, here's what happened. They had a bad race. They started a big investigation. Tim Rooney got president racetrack. They got all the tickets and everything else. They have all the information. They have the window where it was painted with just them 3 numbers box, which means the favorites were dead and everything.
Right.
Everything was obvious, but they had no real solid proof.
Right.
So
Nothing conclusive.
nothing conclusive. I don't know them. See, you know the big words. I don't. So now, that's why I have trouble arguing with you. You hit me with these big words, and so now Tim Rooney, and here's the problem when you start an investigation. You start an investigation, you blast it in the newspapers, you make a big stink about it. This race was fixed, and then you carry on. Now, when they have really no way to prosecute anybody that would hold up, they can't let it drop because they already caused a big, massive thing. So now Tim Rooney keeps going, and he keeps, we're going to get to the bottom of this and everything. And then you know what happened? Tim Rooney Sr., Art Rooney Sr., Tim's father, the bootlegger, the guy who owns the racetrack.
Right.
He calls his son, and here's what he says. This was on a phone call. I'll read what I wrote, so I don't go off. Art Rooney Sr., the owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers and Yonkers Raceway, and whose son Tim ran the racetrack, was fed up with all the negative publicity and feared the racetrack. Now listen to these words. Feared the racetrack would have to close down if the bettors thought every race was fixed. That's what they were.
Wow.
They would never stop. So you know what happened? Art Rooney,
Right.
the guy who his whole life, he did it by himself in the middle of Prohibition and everything else, stayed away from the mob, did it all by himself, bootlegging. I think I have it written down here, so I'm just going to finish reading and then we'll talk about it. Mr. Rooney made a phone call to his son and to the Racing Commission. And you know what? The investigation came to a stop immediately. It was shut right down. Now, naturally, there is no evidence of this, but that's what I was told. Right. And told from somebody that was basically there.
Would have had to have come from there.
Okay. Now, from the 1920s through the 1940s, now here's the guy who made that statement, who was smart enough to know, you keep pushing this thing, you're gonna have to close the doors. That was his father, right. The guy who made millions. From the 1920s through the 40s, Art Rooney Sr., the guy who made the phone call, was running one of the largest racket operations, including numbers, bootlegging, off-track betting, gambling rooms, and slot machines. Okay? In 1972, he bought Yonkers Raceway from the Tannenbaums, that creep, the Tannenbaums for $52 million in 2019. In 1972, he bought Yonkers Raceway for $52 million from the Tannenbaums. In 2019, the Rooney family sold Yonkers to MGM Resorts for $850 million. Wow. Okay? Now, here's where I go on my rant. And this was like a perfect lead to it. Here's a guy that made billions in his life. Never got involved with the mob, never did nothing like that, but ran all them businesses from bootlegging, off-track betting, gambling, numbers. He did it all on his own.
Right.
All right? And he was big enough and strong enough to keep everybody at bay. Now, I'm not saying he didn't have talks with Meyer Lansky or any of them guys. I'm not saying that, but he was really his own man. And he was smart enough to know.
Well, he would have had a friend somewhere along the line.
Well, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But if it did, it wasn't documented. But I believe he did it himself. Because don't forget, back then there was Dutch Schultz. There was a lot of other Irish gangs and everything else. So who knows? Who knows? I don't know. But here's the point I'm trying to make. Here's a guy that knew right from the beginning, like I was told once. Somebody told me this once. Take care of your own dirty laundry. Just keep it in the house.
Right.
Now, from the 1970s, the people in charge, because, and I'll start off with why racing went in them days to have 30,000 people in the stands and handling $5, $6, $7 million a night, to having 3 people in the stands and handling nothing. It's a disgrace.
Sure.
It's just a disgrace. And you know why that happened? It happened because the racing commissions became a political dumping grounds. They put people that retired from being police officers, detectives, they put them in the racing commissions, they made them judges at tracks. They had nobody that knew what the hell they were doing. Now, some people could say, well, all they have to do is follow the rules. Yeah, but what happens when the rules need a change or them rules don't apply no more? These people are not capable or competent enough to rewrite the rules or make new rules. They don't even know what the hell they're looking at. They have no clue. And I witnessed this through the years. They don't want you to give up a hole in the first turn. In other words, any strategic drive, they'll find something wrong with it. You shouldn't have gave him a hole. Well, maybe you want to give the guy a hole because you don't want to be in the 3-hole. Let him be in the 3-hole, you be in the 4-hole. Maybe there's strategic moves a driver makes out there that these judges don't have a clue. But I can't get into that end of it because I'll go on forever. So what they did was they flooded everybody who makes the rules were all political appointees put into positions of complete incompetence. I remember back then that they had no idea. There's a couple of strong points. I hope I remember to get into them because I'll forget and I'll rear off. But they had no idea, as long as their thing was, and maybe through management, who knows, that if the people can get to the racetrack, the races are going on. They wouldn't care if it was below zero. And there were many, many nights back in the 60s and the 70s that we were racing out there 10 below zero, storm. As long as, if the storm hit, as long as there wasn't lightning, and if they didn't have a metal starting car, they would have raced them anyway. Lightning bouncing off the ground, they didn't know, they didn't care. They just knew that the people got there. Now, if the people got there and after the first race, there was a massive snowstorm and everything else, the races went on. I'm sure you've seen many of pictures, and if you're old enough, you've been there, when by the time you get out after the race of the Rover, you can't even get home because the snow is. So, and then they started neglecting everything. They didn't take into consideration that the casinos were being built, gambling was becoming much faster. They didn't take into consideration the lottery. They didn't take into consideration nothing. And then what happened was they started this bullshit of. I hope I remember to get into that because I want to say something first. Everybody in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and I mentioned this 100 times, there was a nightclub on every corner. There was a band in every nightclub.
I remember.
Every restaurant without a band.
They always had live entertainment, right?
And who owned them? All the mob guys. Now, during them years, I remember in the 70s, there's a place in Florida on Commercial Boulevard called Montaneros, I think, or whatever it is. I forgot the name. Anyway, he built that place, and he must have 20 all Godfather, all mob pitches. Mob pitches, all the mob guys came in. So when all the restaurants were being owned and frequented by the mob guys and the drug dealers, and they were the only ones that had all that kind of money. Right. You know what the racetracks did at that time? They barred them from the racetrack. If Rooney owned the racetrack, you know what he'd do? He'd send limousines for all of them. Yeah, come. They're betting $5,000 a race, $10,000.
Why not?
All the money, guys, and they were left with the $2 better. Okay, now everybody says, well, it's the $2 better that supports the races and everything else. Well, you know why? Because there's no big bettors. You left them all off. But if you think the $2 better made them handles, I could name 15, 20 mob guys that would go to the track and lose 20, 30, 40,000 each
Right.
at the end of the day. Okay. So now that's what they did. So now they barred all the guys, all the people with money. So between that and the RICO law, everybody in the life that you were in was barred from the racetrack. And the handle was dropping anyway, and then it dropped and it dropped and it dropped. And before you know it, you have people standing out front looking to sell food stamps so they can go make a $2 bet. And it got to the
Eventually
point
it
where it's
happened to
ridiculous.
Cabert, too.
Now, I'm going to tell you my idea of how to save the thing. I mentioned to John Campbell once when we had that Roosevelt Raceway reunion. I was invited. I can't believe they invited me, but I wasn't invited by the by authority. I was invited by the trainers, Campbell and so anyway, I says to John. John was retired. He just retired. I says, John, I have an idea how to boost this up. It's a crazy idea, but it'll work. I says, if you put a roller coaster in the middle of nowhere, and say free rides.
Right.
There'll be 20,000 cars finding it and be there every single night. Here's how you fill the grandstand up. Because right now, if it wasn't for sports betting, there'd be nobody at the Meadowlands, and that it's so sad. But here's how you could rebuild it: participation. Okay. Now here's what I mean. Let's say you have 10 races a night. 2 of them races have a drawing every night. And in the drawing is, when you come into the racetrack, just market this thing for maybe a month before you start it. Everybody that comes in, we're going to put your name on a card. We're going to put it in this big thing, just like they drew the lottery.
Right.
And if your name is picked, we're going to pick 8 people. Well, at the Meadowlands, it'll be 10 because there's 10 across the track on the gate. If you're picked, you're going to sit in the sulky with the driver in a race. Race with, instead of racing with race bikes, race with jog carts with the big bench seat. And let them sign let them sign whatever they have to sign.
Yeah,
have
they have
the
to
lawyers
sign a
written
waiver,
up
sure,
that they're not going to hold anybody responsible.
Right.
And the chances of having an accident are so slight, especially because you're not going to be going 145 miles. You're going to be going jog cart miles. You probably go miles in 2 minutes or 50, something like that. And put these kids in this thing. Now, here's what's going to happen. All the parents and the kids are going to buy the film, and the whole family is going to come there, and every week it's going to get bigger and bigger. So 2 races a night, have participation. Have them put in, and say after the second race, you have a drawing. You pick out 20 names. These first 10 are going to be in the 5th race, and these last 10 are going to be in the last race. This way you keep everybody there for the last. Keep them all there,
And
okay?
keep the concession stands
And
going,
then
right.
Say you're one of the guys, and I'm Billy O'Donnell. You're going to be sitting with me right on the jog cart,
Right.
and we go behind the gate, the whole bit, just like it was a regular horse race.
People would be excited to be sitting next to Billy Campbell or O'Donnell. Right, sure.
And not only that, but they're going to be buying the film. They're going to be buying everything, and before you know it, you're going to have 50,000 kids there with their parents and everything else.
They're going to want that memory for keepsake.
John at the time said, no, like he didn't want to hear it. But this thing is dropping like the harness racing is going downhill so fast that I don't know, even though there's good people there now, John Camp, finally, they got people that are in racing, drivers, that even the USTA, they got Joe Ferraldo, my pal. He's the head of the whole horseman thing and everything else. They finally got somebody like him that knows what the hell they're doing. They got John Campbell. They got all horsemen now trying to fix somebody. It's like trying to fix a guy who was unconscious for 10 minutes. After 7 minutes, you're brain dead. and harness racing is right. It's 6.5 minutes.
Right.
And I don't know if they could do it, but I know one thing. If they ever did what I just said, as crazy as it sounds, because they're looking to do all, and they're still with this. Goral just bought another 20, 30 guys from the track. And now that creates another problem. You're going to borrow all of these top trainers. They have 30, 40, 50 horses. Where are they going to go? Right. You're going to make sure that they don't just give them to their second trainer and they're still really in charge. And how are you going to do it? What about the owners? What about the owners that put millions of dollars into this game and they can't be held responsible for what the trainer does because of drugs and everything else? And that's another mess that I could figure that out, but I'm not going to do it now because I want to get into something else here. So anyway, that's my idea. I'm not going to go into it because I want to go into something else. That while I was doing this, I want to just get into this, and then we'll end it. Now, let's see. The crime rate. I'm going to read it because I can't remember all of this, and if I start talking, I'll go on forever. The crime rate in the streets of the United States today has cost $4.9 trillion. Wow. $4.9 trillion, the crime rate today. You see on television, all these kids, they run in, they don't even get arrested. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable what's happening. The mob could clean up the streets and stop all this nonsense that's going on right now across the United States. If you put, because I'll tell you, Tough Tony, Federici, Corona, Genovese family. He owned the Parkside Restaurant in Corona. I can give you 50 examples, but I'll just say this one because most of the people listening will probably know because it's kind of current. Through the last 40 years that he was up there, he's every year they used to have a feast in Corona.
Right.
Years back, a couple of these whack jobs thought they can come into the feast and start abusing people and everything else.
Oh, wrong move there.
Yeah, that happened. That happened once. One time, only once, and for the next 40 years, never had a problem.
Right.
You could lay out $1 million in cash in Spaghetti Park, which is right across the street from the Parkside, right there in Corona, right in that street, 108th Street, right there. Lay out money all over the place. 2 o'clock in the morning, shut everything down. You wake up the next morning, not one penny will be missing.
That's right.
Not one penny. Okay? Now, do the same thing at the Bergen Club, wherever there's a club, and there's probably 30, 40 clubs between Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Manhattan. Put $1 million on the street, not one penny will be missing. Not one penny.
Right.
So all I'm saying is that it could never, what's going on today could never happen if you did. Remember that picture, the Dirty Dozen or something, when they took these guys out and they made them fight and they.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now
they were
listen to this. Scheduled to die. And
Listen to this now. I wrote this thing down because once I start getting into it, I figure if I'm going to rant, let me rant a little bit, just to try to justify the stupid, because I know I'm going to get emails saying, what are you, a fucking idiot? You know, and I know I'm going to get that. But somebody got to fix what's going on there. I mean, it's crazy. Okay, now listen to this. Average cost in the United States per inmate is $50,000 a year. That's average from every state. There are roughly 2 million people incarcerated in the United States today. If 1% of them belong to the Cosa Nostra, meaning Italian mobsters, everybody they put in jail, from all of the families.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that, yes.
Yeah, all right. That would total probably 20,000 people that would be left in the street. I got to read this. 20,000 inmates times 50,000 a year in costs comes to $1 million. The government would have a year's harness. No, I screwed up. Anyway, what I'm saying is that if you took them out of jail, you'd save $1 million a year. you'd save $1 million a year and clean up the streets. So take them out of jail, let them go back in their club. Say, listen, you got 30 years. You're gonna have 30 years, but you got under house arrest. But you're allowed to go to the clubs. You're allowed to go to the club. You're allowed to do this and do that.
And you have to show promise in
just
stopping
just leave them out of
the
jail.
crime rate.
You'll save
rise.
you'll
Right,
save
right.
$50,000 a year per inmate that you send out, and there'll be 20,000 of them. Just make each one, and there'll never ever be another problem.
First of all, that figure of 50,000 it's grossly it's overrated because they don't spend $50,000 on you in a year. Trust me, they don't.
Well, California spends a lot more. New York, I think, spends 20,000.
The food we used to get would be the one patty of
but
meat
that's not
this big.
That's not the point. The point is that everything that's going on today, you can't even go into the city without getting carjacked. You can't do nothing. It's crazy.
Right.
It's just insane. So now, in this little short period of time, 20, 30 minutes, whatever I took, and I didn't even explain it right because I just didn't. But you get kind of the idea.
Yes, I get the idea.
I fixed harness racing, and I fixed the problem, the crazy problem that's going on in the streets today, because nobody else is doing anything. So, do you like that idea? Now, if you and your father's 95 years old, if you and your father, and you live right near Newark, you live in the next town over, right? All right, Newark is a real bad neighborhood. You and your father's 95, you're whatever you are.
I'm 66.
66.
But a cool 66.
Yeah, okay. And you got 2 or 3 or 4 of your friends, and you opened up a little clubhouse. You might, the first day, maybe once, these crazy kids might come and try to...
That would only be one time.
Yeah, okay.
That's it.
Now, just picture that in every neighborhood, wherever it's bad. Just put these mob guys there.
That's what I'm saying. Our social club would be like a sanctuary for people. Yeah. Forget it. Nobody would mess with it. It doesn't happen.
On some of these podcasts, you in fact, Sammy Gravano, when he first started, he made this statement that there were many girls that were coming home from school or whatever alone, and when they got to where they were, they always came on their side of the street because they knew they
felt safe. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's right. And today there's no such thing like that. There's no such thing. I remember a couple of months back, this poor guy, a guy comes in, he holds him up. The guy, that old Spanish guy, he winds up killing the guy, in self-defense. The guy comes from behind the counter with a gun and everything else. I mean, somehow whatever happened,
right.
And they wind up locking the guy. It's just unbelievable. So in 30 minutes, I fixed the problem with nobody in the grandstands, because that will work.
And what about the deficit problem now? You want us to loan shark out for the American, the American citizens? Well,
no, that'll be next week. But
just joking.
And we'll close with this. We'll close with this, as long as you went into that. A friend of mine, he just passed away last year. A great guy, Sal Richards. I met him 50 years ago up in Monticello at the Concord, and he started off as a singer, great singer. But there were so many singers. You remember Sal?
Sure, yes.
There were so many singers that he turned into a comedian, and he was a great comedian, and he had a really good career. He was a top guy.
It's like Pat Gallo. Pat Gallo was great from the area too.
I had dinner with Pat with Sal Richards. I had dinner with him about 6 months before he passed away. He passed away so unexpectedly. It was just a shock. He was a great guy. But he does a bit that he's an Italian who's president. And he gets a phone call. Yeah, the office of the president here. Yeah. What? In Russia? A problem? Nah, 2-3 guys, that's all we need.
No, or you just say, what? Yeah, president here. There a problem? Look, I'll take them missiles and I'll shove them up your ass. That's what I'll do to you. That's
you
my
screwed the
point.
whole joke up. See you
I
next
ruined the
week,
show.
guys.
Anyway, I ruined. I'm not a comedian, but anyway, I ruined it. I love Larry. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, and please ring the bell every
You know
time
what
you
I
want
would
to know
like?
what's going on.
I'd like if you now. I kind of made a joke of this whole thing, but I'm really serious. Harness racing is going downhill so fast. I'm not sure if, even though there's good people there trying to save it, I'm not even sure if they could do it. But I really believe if they did what I said, even make it 3 races: the first race, the last race, and 1 race in the middle. Put 10 kids, 10 people, 10, it could be anybody. It could be a grown-up, a kid, or whatever. You'll have the grandstands full. Everybody's going to want, every single night.
Right, with
Everybody's going to want to
participation,
sit in the cart next to the driver in a real horse race. And not only that, but then figure out a way, this is something extra I'm just throwing in. Figure out a way the driver of each horse gets 5%. Give the kid 5%. Give the kid 5%. This way they have a chance to earn 5% of the purse. What's the big deal? The 5%, what's it going to be? A few $100s? Give the kid, the participant, 5%, the driver his legitimate 5%, and do 3 races out of a 10 race card. The first, the 5th, and the 10th. You'll have everybody there for all the races, and the grandstands will be full. I really believe, no kidding around, that if you agree, send it in. I'm anxious to hear if, I don't know if Jerry Glantz is a sharp guy. He's probably a very sharp guy. If Jerry, if you're listening, tell me what you think of that idea. I know it's crazy, but I don't know of anything else that could work. So with that, we'll see you next week, and have fun.
Bye-bye, everybody. Take care.